Thank you. And this isn't the first time I've been in this wonderful community space, because I came over to meet a friend who introduced me to a volunteer who comes down here to volunteer. And I think that that is at the heart of my whole vision for the West of England. We had a hustings this morning with the voluntary and charities sector, and all of that is about the sum total of what we have as individuals to offer, and I want all of the talents to be made use of. So in terms of what I'm offering you a nature, nurture and needs plan, and first and foremost, because I am from the Green Party, it is about that nature. How do we protect it, but also how are you part of it? How can we empower our communities to have better local plans, to have neighbourhood plans, because all of that then adds up to what we do with that spatial planning. Because if we are saying that you have employment land and housing land, but we have no space for the environment, then we live in a very arid place, and I don't think that's good for any of us for our mental health and our well-being. So my promise in week 1 is to sort of look at and provide extra office support for community organisations in order to put extra funding bids in and to put project bids in for funding from WECA, but also from other organisations where we can bring extra funding and revenue into the region. So in terms of that nurturing, it's very much based on what we can all bring to the table. I think we need a new social contract. I spent 6.5 years at the National Composites Centre working with some of the world's global multinational companies like GKN, Rolls-Royce, Airbus. That's unusual for somebody from the Green Party, although obviously Carla spent her time as an engineer working in the renewables sector. We also worked with the renewables sector too. And that ability for that organisation, part of the high value manufacturing catapult system, part of the government's way to keep high-paying jobs, high-skilled jobs here in the UK by working with multinationals and also then getting them connected to local entrepreneurs and applying for additional funding bids. That's a really well-tested and well-tried model. And in fact, the Fraunhofer system in Germany is one where they have a lot of regional development, and that's what this system in the UK was based on. So I think we can do that to nurture our communities, because if we have that partnership between the individual, the community, the place, i.e. our nature, and private equity, as well as with the council, with the combined authority, then we can tie that all up to work together to get a better deal for everybody. Because I think it's important that we start at that lowest level, because there are still a lot of deprived communities, and people who are not getting that best start in life. So another promise on that is by the end of my first year, I would like to ensure that the average skill in reading age for English and in maths and in enhancing our ability to have digital skills and green tech skills is raised, because there's £19 million worth of skills funding specifically in order to provide that adult education where people have missed out as a first opportunity. Is that that's my 1 minute. Sorry, getting used to the timing system there. It looked like a big red stop now. It's the longest time we've had is 5 minutes, and I really appreciate that. I think we all will. We've had hustings where we are giving answers in 30 seconds or a minute, and really in the end that doesn't do you a service for you to understand what we're about and what we can offer. The luxury of 5 minutes is absolutely brilliant and appreciated. So those two. So I've set out what I would do in my first week, and what I deliver by my first year. So on the nature, To recap, that was protect our environment, boost that support for community projects, and build environmental protection. Because if we want to protect the green belt, then we need to have that in the neighbourhood plans. And then in growing that thriving economy with the skills, then that's the sustainability outcomes for the policies, reviewing those and raising those skill levels in English, maths, green tech and digital tech. And then finally on transport, the most important one, that for many people, it's reviewing that process for the Freedom Pass, which currently exists. Is that a 5? Right, okay, really speed up, apologies. Just to finish that point, that thought. So there's currently a Freedom Pass, which is a through ticket for both a bus and a train ticket. There's also a birthday bus pass. If you combine those two, get rid of that birthday bus pass for a month, of one Freedom ticket, allow people to use that bus pass over the whole year. 1 day per week we could afford to fund free travel. Not only does that enable people to try a sustainable way of transport, it also enables you to cut congestion and cut pollution. And then I would franchise the buses, and apologies for overrunning.
Thank you, Mary. I think it's it's a very valid point, because normally you expect your politicians to give you 30-second answers, so you just have a whole sort of thing of sound bites. I can invent sound bites. Get Brexit done, that was a sound bite, wasn't it? That worked well. Sorry, no. Okay. Okay, so Ollie from the Liberal Democrats, if you would give us your best 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much. It's great to be here, and as you say, I'm the ward councillor that actually comes just about 100 metres down the road here for Walcott Ward, so it's great to be in home turf and great to be with all of you. Really keen to hear from you as well tonight and look forward to a really meaningful discussion. So just...
You just move your hand.
I'm too close?
No, you're fine. Just don't put your hand in.
Okay, there we go. So apart from being a local councillor, in my professional life, I've also worked on sustainable development for many, many years, and I followed the UN's process going back to 2015 when the Paris Agreement was being signed. So sustainability is a key kind of value for me in everything that I do. I've also been the Cabinet Project Lead alongside Sarah Warren on Baines' own approach to sustainability, and I think I can bring a lot of that expertise into this role and make sure that WECA, the West of England Combined Authority, itself becomes a much more sustainable organisation and can lead the region and potentially set a leading role around the world, in fact. I think we do have the capabilities, we have the skills, we have the knowledge in this region to be a leader on sustainability. So I'm going to set out a few key areas that I would focus on if elected, and I'm very happy to continue the conversation and also even after tonight if people want to email me to follow up on any of the points I've raised. So I do have quite a detailed manifesto which you might have already received in the booklet. Hopefully you will have had a chance to see that. It does have quite a few specifics, so I won't necessarily run through every single one, but the first big theme is around decarbonising transport. We do know, and you're right, the 6 and 7 bus is one of the ones that goes right through my ward, and I've already raised it actually with First Bus because it's been very unreliable, as have many other services across the region, and I think that's putting people off going on the buses, and we need to focus on a reliable public transport, and that starts with buses, and I think that starts with franchising the buses. That means taking more direct control as an authority to set the routes, to make sure no community is cut off, to make sure that we have more affordable prices as well, and in particular looking at younger people, how we can enable easier transport for people to get to study, to get to their place of work, so bringing the cost down. And I think it was a missed opportunity by the outgoing mayor just now not to cap the fares as other regional mayors did. And I think we need to look very closely at the overall fare structure to make sure that people are given greater opportunities to use the buses. But it wouldn't stop at the buses. I think we also do need to look at light light rail. I see David here in the front row who has some excellent ideas on how that could be done. And I know it's been discussed many times, but I'm confident that at this point in the cycle, given the way that there is such an interest across the region, that there is the opportunity to really start that conversation on light rail and looking at some of the disused railway lines that run through our region, looking at ways that we can unlock additional funding as they've done in Manchester and Nottingham and other places. So I think there's a real opportunity there. So the second big area is, of course, around housing and sustainable housing. We do have already Retrofit West, which some of you will know, which I see Sarah Grimes over here, and there's a huge amount of expertise already on how we retrofit our housing stock in the region. We need to go much further with that and move faster, get more funding into that area. But also the net zero new build approach, which is already embedded here in Baines Council. I'd like to see that across the whole region so that any new building is sustainable from the start. That will also bring people's bills down. That will mean that people are living in homes that are more affordable for the long term. Thirdly, renewables. I think we've got a huge opportunity with renewables. We do have, the potential here for more wind, the potential for more solar, but also I think even for hydro on the River Avon and potentially even tidal in the Severn Estuary. That's something that they're looking at down in Minehead as well. I know, again, it's been talked about for many years. I wouldn't be in favour of a barrage across the Severn, but I think the new proposal around tidal pools, tidal lagoons, could unlock, they say, up to 7% of the UK's entire energy needs could be generated that way. So finally, my final point, as I know time is running out, is around championing nature. Clearly, as a region, we do have a huge opportunity here. This was the first region to sign a local nature recovery strategy, as you probably have seen, and I think that gives us a good basis to build on. And there is actually a great team already within the WECA offices that's been looking at this, working with each of the 3 local authorities, with Baines, with Bristol, and with South Gloucestershire. And I think we can work then with the local landowners, conservation charities, and there's a real opportunity here as well to unlock additional funding through biodiversity net gain. So when you build new housing, you then provide some additional funding for biodiversity somewhere else within the region. That will unlock additional funding for so many of our green spaces that we want to encourage. So thank you. There was more that I could have said, but you can find it on the booklet. And as I said, I'm very happy to continue the conversation through today and the coming week. Thanks.
Doesn't he speak quickly? So a very brave independent. We don't normally get one in a mayoral race, but we've got one this time. And this is Ian Scott from South Gloucestershire, and he'll introduce himself, and his 5 minutes start from now.
So I'm Ian Scott, the independent candidate, and ironically I was the one who gave apologies early because today my youngest daughter is 30, so I thought I would be on a 3-line whip not to attend today. But a couple of weeks ago she had her second baby, so I've been let off, so I am able to join you. Last night me and Mary were at Trinity Church in Bristol, and I have to say there's a much bigger audience tonight that has turned up tonight, and I'm inspired to talk a bit about history because I grew up on the St Anne's Park Council estate in Bristol by the old St Anne's board mills. But that has a long history because St Anne's Woods, after the Canterbury pilgrimages, was the second biggest pilgrimages in England in the Middle Ages, where people used to go to St Anne's Wood. I could also see from my bedroom window the green light, which is famous for where Wesley preached in Hanham as well. So I'm going to talk about sustainability, but I don't expect you to vote for me on what I say about sustainability, because I think the other candidates and hopefully myself will be saying much the same. I'll try and say some new things. It doesn't repeat what's already been said. And I think when it comes to sustainability, it's not the politicians that will lead this. Just like previously, it will be the scientists and the engineers, because they're coming up with the new technologies that we need to use going forward. I want to touch on a couple of issues. I do like the lagoon. My MP used to be a guy called Dr. Doug Naismith, and he was a big fan about the Severn Barrage. but practically they said there's good reasons why that won't work, so I am a supporter of the lagoons. But I'm from Filton, which is the home of the aerospace industry. I've been living in Filton for 30 years, and in some sense, Filton Airfield now represents what WECA is all about. We've got probably the biggest housing development there, 6,500 houses. We've still got Rolls-Royce there, Airbus there, so it's really critical. And I was listening to the debate about the second runway at Gatwick, and an engineer came on from Airbus, and he said within 10 years we can have electric planes. They won't take you to Australia, but they will take you to Europe. So the expansion at Bristol, going from 12 million to 15 million, well, I say we shouldn't support that, because that would then encourage the people who make money out of aeroplanes to invest in the technology so we can have electric aeroplanes going forward. And if people do want to go to Australia, they can actually go from other sites to do that. We know there's fantastic work going on with wind turbines. There's been a reluctance to allow them on land. In South Gloucestershire, I'm a South Gloucestershire councillor, and we do have them in South Gloucestershire. We know all the wind turbines down at Avonmouth as well. And North Somerset is important, because without North Somerset we have no airport at all. So what economic area could you have without an airport? It's ridiculous. Of course North Somerset should have been allowed in, but they've also got the Royal Portbury Docks in North Somerset as well. So I will be asking you to vote for me, not on what I say about sustainability, but I'm the most experienced candidate in the race, because whilst I am an independent, I've been a councillor for 25 years. 15 years on Filton Town Council and 10 years as South Gloucestershire Councillor, but I worked in local government as a local government officer, policy advisor, 10 years in Bristol and 2 years in South Gloucester. So that's why I will be asking you to vote for me, because I believe I've got the experience to do the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, now this is the meat of the organisation. So what we've got is 5 questions. I'm going to ask people in different orders to stand up and just do a couple of minutes on each. If anyone, well, we'll see how it goes, whether you guys have anything to contribute or not. See how we go, shall we? So I'm going to ask, yes, the magic thing says Ollie goes first. So here's your question. What would you do to address the unprecedented, mandated recent increase in local housing targets, and how can we deal with that with our transport network that we have at the moment? So, Ollie first, then Ian, then Mary.
Well, so this is a key question. I'm glad that it's come up. Oh, sorry. Close again. I've discussed this actually with Matt McCabe, who's the lead for housing here within Baines. And one of the key things that he highlighted, and I think all the 3 councils have highlighted this, is that there just hasn't been a joined up approach across the 3 areas. So this could have been done under the current mayor, and it just wasn't brought together. So what we need is a joined up spatial strategy, they call it. That's the technical term. So it's a joined up strategy that looks at all 3 of the local authority areas across the region. It then looks at identifying how you balance housing needs across the region, and also crucially linking that with transport. So a strategy that also looks at where are already existing transport opportunities, how could we also then better connect. So for example, here between Bath and Bristol, what can we do in terms of the A4? How can we bring in, for example, an additional train station in Salford? Does that then allow potentially some additional housing there? Do we potentially look at routes out towards Midsummer Norton, where there's going to be the Summer Valley Enterprise Zone? So it's trying to find ways to connect people better so that wherever they live, they are part of that community, but they're also connected in both to Bath and to Bristol. The other thing I would say on this is that it has to be done in consultation with local residents. I think it's absolutely essential that we do build and work with local communities in each part of the combined authority area. So that would require proper consultation, real dialogue, to actually work with local communities and make sure, if new housing is being proposed, that the infrastructure comes alongside it. So that means GPs, that means access to education, that means that you don't just end up with people being left stranded and disconnected. So I think it's connecting all of those different aspects, the transport, the infrastructure, and then you can get the right homes in the right places across the whole region.
Thank you. Mary?
The Green Party stance is very much to have one in the right homes, in the right place, at the right price. I, like some of the other candidates, had a bit of a sort of Chatham House rules round table with some of the planners and developers, and I was pushed very hard by them in a Jeremy Paxman kind of style. You know, would you accept the government new housing targets? And I kept saying, no, not necessarily. Not if the local councils are telling me that their numbers add up better, because it is not our job, in order to fill that gap that government has in their housing numbers. It is our job to house the people we have in decent, fit for human habitation homes. And I'm very much fundamentally of the belief that these are homes to be lived in, not for Airbnbs, because we have a rise of that. In many of the central wards in Bristol, we have over 200 Airbnbs in some of the most deprived communities where there is no housing. And that causes issues for a city, because there is no ability to tax that, to provide the services. And I agree with pretty much almost everything that Ollie has said, actually, and you will find a lot of agreement, I think, across all of us. So, but it isn't carte blanche. We have to be bold, and we have to stand up to government when we don't think that they have got their sums right. But what we can do is, as Ollie said, we can use the WECA budgets in order to provide transport. Because when I pushed back to the developers and said, what do you need to unlock the pockets of housing where a small village or a town might like a few extra, but you're finding it difficult, what do we need to provide? They all said transport was a key issue to unlock those opportunities. And that might be enough to sustain a small village shop or the local pub or whatever, and it's about integrating those communities. But too many of our homes, as I say, are not fit for habitation, and so, you know, that retrofit programme is absolutely essential. We have to improve the housing stock we have. Bristol has very recently sort of decided to sell off a whole 14 houses of council homes because they were so unfit for habitation that we felt that they felt that they could not be brought up to standard in a reasonable way. But the receipt of that will be used to ensure that the maintenance of the existing stock will be done. And I think there's innovative ways of working with all of the councils in order to bolster and support that. And I think that in terms of the priorities, we need to be building to rent, and we need to ensure that all of those homes have the best sustainability and insulation that we can provide, because that is the way that we actually get growth, but that is sustainable.
Thank you. Ian?
Thank you. Thank you. Because I've been a councillor so long, I've had two opportunities to vote on local plans. In 2012, I voted against the South Gloucestershire local plan because they wanted to build houses on a place called Hall Wood, which, if you know that area well, is just up from Clifton Rugby Club, and subsequently they have built houses there. At that time, the Tories and the Liberal Democrats voted for those houses on the Green Belt. I was a Labour councillor at the time, and the whole Labour group voted against it. In 2025, I've had another chance to vote on the local plan, the South Gloucester local plan, and again I voted for it. This time, the Tories voted against houses on the Green Belt, but Liberal Democrats and Labour voted for houses on the Green Belt. I was consistent. I was an independent by then. There's a long story behind that. And I voted again against Green Belt, but for this reason, it's a particular reason. They wanted the Green Belt is obviously the area between Bath and Bristol. East of the ring road around Bristol, they wanted to build houses, not just on Green Belt, but also on green fields there. In 2008, the last Labour government closed Frenchy Hospital, promised us a new community hospital with rehabilitation beds and 2 minor injuries units, one at Frenchy, one at Cosham. The Tories never delivered upon it, and now we've got a new Labour government, so I'm holding their feet to the cause and say we need that hospital. Since then, we've had a 10% growth in population. If we needed it then, how can we have more housing now until you provide the NHS as it is? Already in Emerson's Green, there's not enough GPs, there's not enough doctors. How can you put even more houses there without the infrastructure? And we all know developers put any infrastructure in last and then say to the councils, we can't afford to put the homes that you asked us to do affordable because it would be unprofitable. They go to an inspector and win the cases. But let me address the elephant in the room, because we don't just need any housing. What we actually need is council housing. We went through a depression in the 1930s and we built council houses. The council house I lived in was built in the 1930s, still there now, and it provides adequate housing for lots of people. In the 1950s, we'd just come out of a massive debt because of the Second World War that we owed to the USA, and we built council houses. In fact, I'll give credit to the Conservatives here. Macmillan built more council houses than any other government previously and ever since. I'm ashamed that Labour government never beat their record. But we all know what happened in the 1980s. Thatcher sold off council housing, and she was advised for every house you sell off, you have to build a new one. And they never did it. And I know some of it, I own my own house, and I'm sure it's gone up in value. I probably won't see it. My kids might see it when I'm gone. But the reality is young people can't afford homes today. We need to build council houses, and when they say it can't be done, it can be done. If it can be done during the Depression, it can be done after the Second World War, and they were called Homes for Heroes. We can do it again now. We just need a government to actually bite the bullet and do it. Thank you.
I would just agree with, I think, the point that Ian made about the social housing, absolutely crucial. I mean, and Baines is building social housing for the first time in 30 years. I know that that's something that we need to do across the whole region, absolutely.
And yeah, absolutely. You know, in Bristol Council, when it was under the committee system, built 50,000 council homes, and yet under the Mayoral system in the last 8 years, built, barely 10,000. But additionally, there is the power within the Mayoral authority to have a development corporation to look to provide that social housing. So I think that's something that's worth exploring. And of course, more powers come with the devolution bill. So yeah, I absolutely agree with both of the other candidates.
I'm going to ask the candidates when they give their answers, because if you're like me, I don't quite fully understand how WECA can influence this. So if when they give their answers, they could say how WECA will be able to influence whatever the question is they're addressing, it would help me, if not you guys. If you don't need to know, just wave at me and I'll let them talk. But if we could say, I'm elected, this is WECA, this is what WECA can do. This is what we're going to vote on, because they spend, is it 200 million a year? 380 million, enough to buy me a new house. Right, in an area. So, Philip, if we could have the next question, please. Okay, one very close to my heart. As you all know, Bath used to be, or Bath and North East Somerset, when it was it used to be self-sufficient in food. So the food was grown in all the things surround, and that's all changed. So Food and Farming and Countryside Commission's National Food Conversation research shows that citizens consider the current food system to be unfair, unhealthy, unsustainable. So what if it is within the remit of WECA to start to address this problem? Let's hear what they would do. And Ian, can I start with you? And then go to Mary and then Ollie.
I'm certainly not an expert in this area, and I'm probably guilty coming from Bristol. Bristol's always been a famous trading port, so no doubt we started getting food from abroad through that Bristol port to come to places like this. We all know there's a problem with food mileage. I can remember when the used to be the car presenter, Clarkson. He developed his own farm, and I really like watching the show. And then he set up his own farm shop. But then he got called in by the inspectors because he had avocado in there. And they said, well, you must be getting these from South America. No, you're only supposed to sell local produce. And in my day job, I'm a regional officer with the National Education Union, and I mainly cover Wiltshire and Swindon. And as I travel around, you go to somewhere like Wiltshire, there are lots of farm shops that you can go to, and a lot of the food we eat in Bristol and in Bath does come from rural Wiltshire, and they're famous for their food in Wiltshire. I think locally in terms of food, I have to say I did agree with Dan Norris about his promotion of bees, because without bees you can't have all these producing flowers and plants in that. But I think what we should try and do, I have to say, I know in Bristol and South Gloucestershire, and I'm sure it's true in Baines, there are still lots of allotments, and I know that in Bristol there are normally waiting lists to get on those allotments. So I remember part of having, remember it was called Welwyn Garden City, the thought was as people moved out of places like London, you would be able to grow your own vegetables in your own homes in the gardens in that. And I think there was a history of that. There's still a history of allotments, and we should encourage both allotment use for growing local food, but also community use, because some people don't want to do it on their own, or sometimes I find it difficult to keep up an allotment, but would do it if it was in a community allotment. So I would encourage community allotments. Thank you.
I had the absolute pleasure to go to the Red Catch Community Garden the other day, where they're encouraging and teaching people how to use food and to grow food. And I absolutely think that is essential, that we support organisations like that. So in the first place, I think there's a way of supporting local businesses in market gardens, and so to apply for any funding and offer support to do that. In the next instance, I would like to reform the way that the West of England Combined Authority tenders for its contracts. So I would like to increase their social value, because at the moment their contracts are tendered on the most economic advantageous tender. Now that doesn't say sustainability to me, it doesn't say community, and I don't think it benefits us in the West of England. It means that a multinational company can come in and then take that wealth straight back out again without providing us of any benefit here. So I think enforcing that and changing those social contracts that we have with companies who do provision, which then acts as a leader and an exemplar for the rest of the organisations. The public health remit is not currently with the West of England, but there's powers potentially with the devolution bill that it might be. So there might be an opportunity there to negotiate with hospitals and with those medical providers in order to encourage those local contracts. And I think, again, you've heard me say that is very much something I'm keen on. It's about getting those interconnected local deals, because if we make that money here, we spend that money here. Multi-millionaires don't spend that money. You know, every pound that anybody here gets, anyone who's either on benefits or is working, has got a pension, we're mostly spending that money for the benefit of businesses, of our friends, of people we know, and all of the communities around us. So I think it's a much better investment in us and what we can provide in the region. And then in terms of the schools, and as well, I think there's similarly, you can be the exemplar. In terms of the actual locations of those market gardens, Wouldn't it be great if we could actually have some transport to get there? So what I didn't say with the Freedom Pass was, with the Freedom Pass, actually try and load up some extra discounts on there and provide additional transport for things like community transport and so on. So we get all of the routes and people are able to get around sustainably in order to connect those local businesses who are helping us eat more healthily, because it's expensive, isn't it, to buy those, those healthy products. It's very easy to go down and buy cheap products, and therefore I think we need to extend that opportunity for everybody.
Great. So you asked us to talk specifically about what can WECA actually do. So what could the West of England Combined Authority do in this area? So the key thing with the West of England as a body is that it sets the strategy and the strategic direction that then the different local authorities work within. So I mentioned in my opening the local nature recovery strategy, which was the first one to be agreed in the country. And within that local nature recovery strategy, you can actually have specific areas of land set aside for different purposes. And so I think that could be one of the key opportunities there, working with landowners who are already interested and keen to see more sustainable land use. So that is kind of part of the approach that would come out of that local nature recovery strategy, working in partnership. But I think we can go further than that and do a specific food strategy as well. So that looks at the whole supply chain from the producer through to distribution centres, because I've heard from middle ground growers, for example, some of you will know that they sometimes have a challenge in terms of the distribution. Where does that food then come to? How can you then get it out to local consumers in our towns and villages, and here in Bath or in Bristol? So making sure that we provide that connection from the producer through a distribution to retail, so that people can actually get access to locally produced food. I also think there is a key role, and in the question you've mentioned it, around procurement. So that's partly by the West of England itself, as Mary has said, but also many of the other public bodies within the region. So working with the schools, working with the universities, working with the hospitals to make sure that they build in that local procurement into their supply chains as well. So you can then tie in both the social and environmental impacts within the procurement chain. So I think if we could get all of that right, that would unlock a huge market for local producers as well, and that would really catalyse that change that this question is alluding to.
Sorry, I forgot to mention, if anyone needs the facilities, they're there, so just sort of creep round and through that door. I also, as this is Transition Bath and we've organised this, I want to blow our own trumpet, because the forerunner of Transition Bath was set up the Bath Farmers Market, which, as you all know, was the first farmers market in Britain and is still going today. So Transition Bath is obviously a good thing. Wouldn't you agree? Thank you. Thank you, Mother. Yeah, do you want to say something? Yes, of course, Mary.
Just one other thing, I actually come from quite a lot of farming stock from Kent. So my family were fruit growers, but I actually grew up on a hop farm, another important ingredient to something that a lot of us enjoy consuming on an evening. And the other part of my family have tenant farmers in Oxfordshire, not very far from Jeremy Clarkson. And actually there's no money in tenant farming. My aunt farmed until she was 90 because she could not retire. We have to do a better deal for that. We have to do a better deal for our people who are producing the food in this country. And, I can't quite say exactly how I would use the budget in WECA, but I'd definitely be looking to support that.
Right, thank you. So, Philip. Okay, so it's a big question at the moment, and to be fair, there's a lot of work about, especially from, I mentioned Bath and West Community Energy, about making the housing stock that we have fit for purpose. And it's called retrofitting, which means if you've got an old house, you make it warm and comfortable. So the question 3 would be, Retrofit West is a CIC, that's a community interest company, reduces energy bills and carbon emissions, yet its long-term funding is at risk. Actually, I don't need to say this, do I? You can read it, can't you? Yeah? Okay, so what I'm going to do is ask Ollie if he could talk to that first, and then Ian, and lastly Mary.
Absolutely. So I did actually mention Retrofit West in my opening, and I think it has been a fantastic project. I think we do need to continue exactly this kind of project and go much further. We know that we have a heritage housing stock which is quite challenging to heat and quite challenging to keep warm. So crucially, I know that there's changes also to the planning structures to allow for heritage buildings to be retrofitted, and that's a key part of the work I know that Bath and West Community Energy have been doing with the council, and I think it's really important that we build on that. So that means insulation, that means slimline double glazing, that means looking at different heating systems and how we change the way that we heat our homes, and it is a big investment, and I know that it will take time, and that's why I think we do need to unlock additional funding for this area. I think that there is the potential within the West of England to draw down additional funds. One of the key challenges, as you'll know, is that under the outgoing mayor, WECA has been under special measures, and so it hasn't even been able to get full access to budgets in the way that other regional authorities have done. And it's crucial now, whoever is the mayor, that we get the authority into a much more stable position so that it can draw down these additional funds. It's what they call being an established authority, and I think that's really, really crucial. I think that would then also allow us to unlock private support and private funders to come in as well if they see that there's a core fund, and I would see a kind of infrastructure development fund that we could establish for the region, and we could then draw in additional private fund, both for this, for retrofitting, and for the renewables that I talked about earlier on as well.
If you see any of my election material, you won't see it posted through your door. I've got no funds to do anything like that. You will only see it on a Facebook page. But my top line is give us our money back, because it's been touched on by Ollie. 16th of December 2024, the government issues its devolution paper. In that devolution paper, the Premier League for integrated funding, which means you've got more control over your funding, is West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, I could understand, Liverpool, but not the West of England. Do you know what's different about the West of England? West of England is a net contributor to the British economy. The places in the north, and I like our friends in the north, but we're the ones giving the money to the government. What I say on your behalf is give us our money back, because without the money, and Ollie touched on really great schemes going forward, but you imagine the Victorian houses in Bristol, you've got Georgian housing as well in Bath. There's no way any of that can be done effectively unless we get more money from the government. And even then, it still won't be done, because if I'm being honest with you, there's still not going to be enough money to go round for all the schemes that people want. But the starting point is the West of England needs to get the proper funding from the government. And people say, and they've asked me, well, how can an independent do that? Well, if an independent wins the election, and remember that Sue Mount-Stevens won the police commissioner twice as an independent, so it is possible, that will send a warning shot across the government's backs. Because effectively, the thing that politicians care most about is keeping all of their seats. Labour won a lot of seats last time in the West of England. We need to send a message to the government, if you don't give us our fair funding now, in the future it'll be your MPs next. So there's a good incentive for the government to make sure. I'm not asking for any favours here. I'm not Oliver saying please more. I'm demanding we get the fair funding we deserve, because we're making that contribution to the British economy and we need to get our money back. Thank you.
I don't stand alone when I come as the candidate from the Green Party. I come with a manifesto. I stood as a parliamentary candidate in Bristol North West, and I'm firmly behind all of our policies that you can look up online, because unfortunately, like Ian, we don't have the funding of the larger parties. I can't afford the £20,000 to produce the 400,000 leaflets that would go to all of your homes, plus the 30,000 to deliver it. So apologies if you have not heard directly from me. We have got information out where we can, and I'm online. But in that, we are firmly committed to retrofitting of properties, but also it needs to be working with landlords in order to ensure that the homes are upgraded, and with social housing. I think that's we have to start there. We have to work with the councils in order to ensure that all of the current housing stock, that is either council owned or social housing owned, is prioritised for upgrades in terms of insulations, because there's a double penalty there for people who are living in that home which is not insulated. They're also paying higher energy bills. And that is something that it just doubles and quadruples every single time. If you live in a deprived community who lives further away from where you work, you have to travel further, you're paying more for your travel, you've then got your higher bills because you're in not as good housing stock. And then there's everybody in rented accommodation or in leasehold properties where you can't get the permission to do any of those innovations. One of the questions we were asked on this was, what have I done to improve my home? I live in a leasehold property, in a flat, and sometimes it's really difficult. And a lot of people would like to help, and so therefore we have to look for those grants, and we have to increase the use of Retrofit West, and and increase that offer that we give to individuals, because that can't be borne by all of those individuals. It wasn't their fault that we've allowed those housing developments to be built like they were. We have to go back and rectify that and support people to make good choices, because unless we help people, no one can actually change.
Right. Do you want to reply? Anyone? No? It is. How many people in this room, just a hands up, have a heat pump? How many people would like a heat pump?
Peter, can I speak?
Can you speak?
Can I speak?
Do you want to speak?
Yes.
Come and speak.
Thank you.
Very quickly.
Very quickly.
There you go. Just turn the light.
Yeah, it won't. There you are. My name is Robin Kerr, and I'm the chairman of the Bath Alliance for Transport and Public Realm. Bath has a particular problem, which Ian alluded to. Bath has 5,000 listed properties. It's extremely difficult and very expensive to upgrade them the way that would be necessary. However, there is light on the horizon. There is a thing called the zero-emission boiler, which you can buy from a company called Tepeo. So it's an electric boiler, but it gets its heat at night when the electricity is cheaper. And I've been speaking to Tepeo very recently, and I'm going to speak to them again tomorrow, and that may be the solution. Thank you.
He doesn't have shares in the company.
Do I look as though I
Or
have
maybe
shares
he
in the
does
company?
have shares in the company. Okay, I'm going to move on. I can see the question, but I'll come back and oh, hello.
Peter, it's just maybe sort of thing that obviously, and the other opportunity, which I think the others probably will share, is within the adult skills budget in terms of ensuring, because we've got a shortage of over 40,000 construction workers within the southwest region, and the government's proposal was just to train another 60,000 for the whole country. It's not, we take the majority of that here, so we have to use that adult skills budget in order to enable more companies to do those retrofits, to learn more about the air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, solar panels, everything that we can do in order to make our energy in a more sustainable way.
Quickly. Yes, go on. I can hear you.
Bryn Jones, I represent the sister organisation, Transition Back, Transition Hardcore. Cutting across all the policy areas is the question of internal democracy. A lot of people upset that the regional mayor system is creating another tier and limited local accountability, local channels of communication. What, if elected, what would you do to increase local participation by community groups to provide local knowledge for local solutions to our problems?
Right, brilliant.
That's a good question, and it's question number 5. So there you are. We knew you'd be here, so we thought we'd ask that. In the meantime, we'll go on to question number 4, Philip, please. Okay, so how would you balance the demands on different modes of transport, and what would be your what would your priorities be? I can't remember who starts. I think Ollie starts. Who cares?
So, I mean, this is one of the challenging questions at the moment, isn't it? And we do need to grasp that nettle and identify ways to balance out the different ways that we move around. We have particular challenges both in Bath and in Bristol with the very narrow historic streets that we have and the challenges that poses to the volume of car traffic that we see. And I do think we need to be creative about enabling people to make other choices, not to be so dependent on their cars. And that's a step-by-step process. And I think, you know, we have to learn the lessons. There might be times when certain types of approaches might go too far. We need to then come back and think, how do we actually encourage and enable other opportunities? So that's where the buses come in, and that's why I mentioned I would franchise the buses to make sure that we have a much more reliable service so people feel they can rely on the bus, they know when it's going to come. When they look on the notice board, it does actually show up rather than just disappearing from the notice board. So making sure that buses are the bedrock of that transport. I think then linking buses and integrating them better with rail, making sure that we have better opportunities. I mentioned earlier in terms of additional rail stations, and not just the existing rail network, but looking at where there might be opportunities for light rail, tram type system, particularly around Bristol. I've been to look at one of the sites in Brislington where there's a disused railway line which is not being really used for anything at the moment. Would be an ideal location, and it would connect with the park and ride that you have in Brislington as well. So there are ways that we can be much more creative with the infrastructure that's already there, and we can build out from the existing infrastructure. And then finally, the other piece of the puzzle is the pavements and the way that we use our pavements better. I know that a lot of people talk about walking alongside wheeling and cycling, making sure it's safe for all different users of the roads and those who might be wheelchair dependent, making sure that we have drop curbs where we need them, that crossings function properly. So it's thinking about that whole joined up approach, the journey that someone goes on from their house to a bus and through to a train or wherever it might be that they go. So having that integrated approach would be really crucial. And that would be one of the first things I would do actually, is work with the West of England officers to actually come up with a much clearer strategy for transport across the region.
So in the list that we were given in our questionnaire, I said that subsidising public bus services would be my first priority on transport, bus franchising as the second, new railway stations, then safe pedestrian crossings. And, you know, I echo what, you know, and then going further down the list, cycle paths, e-scooters, residence parking zones, bus lanes, trams, you know, because we have to have that integrated network of transport. But all the journeys start with us walking places. So Ollie's point is, you know, on that accessibility is so important. There is a nightmare in the middle of Bristol whereby all of the cycle paths and all of the pavements are all grey, and particularly in the heritage places, and I'm sure you have those issues here, where you're not allowed to have colours to signify or differentiate. You know, that's difficult enough if you have full 20/20 vision, but if you don't, then that is an added disablement of your access to society, and we cannot continue disabling 12 million people in the UK, and however many that relates to in terms of people with disabilities in Bath, South Gloss and Bristol, because they can't have equal opportunity and equal access to transport. Vitally important to me that we make the structures and infrastructure as accessible as possible, and that, you know, the solution is just not more of the same. We have to integrate all of those opportunities, and I think that's one of the main points out of the Freedom Pass that I can do, because if you've got car journeys, you know, because we can get a discount on trying out an e-car or an e-van, then that might help somebody shift and might help them look at a new form of transport. They're still too expensive though. We need government subsidy for that in order to help people transition, because we have to have that just transition for people. We cannot just say to somebody, you're bad because you're driving a diesel car, when actually years ago people were told, you know, you should have a diesel car. You know, and in terms of that travel allowance, the person I met here who volunteers here, she's got an unintended consequence, negative impact because of the clean air zone here. The person that she relies on to take her to go shopping, because she is disabled, has a non-compliant vehicle. That means that when they do that, they have to pay the charge. So how about we actually use that travel allowance for people with disabilities to enable them and negotiate with the local councils to say, actually, for the interim, for the support network for these people, we allow you to pay the charge from your travel allowance. Let's be really innovative and be more inclusive.
Thank you. Let's start with the big picture. We're the biggest conurbation in Western Europe without a mass transit system. That is a disgrace. And I appreciate the point about Victorian roads. But in Filton, George White didn't just develop aeroplanes, he developed a tram system down those Victorian streets. So we've had it before, it can be done. We've put a tunnel underneath the Downs in Bristol, and the line goes out to Avonmouth from Temple Meads. So these things can be done, but they can only be done with money. Now, in reality, what we'll end up talking about is not a mass transit system. We'll end up talking about bus franchising. Now, I think it's inevitable we're going to go down that route. But I have to say, we need to remember bus franchising doesn't mean public ownership of the buses. Because when you franchise buses, the only people who are going to run those buses are going to be private bus operators. So you can set the routes, you can set as many routes as you like, and you can set rural routes, but I'm telling you, no bus operator is going to bid for that work because they say it's just not enough profit. And what we have to remember is what happened in Nottingham, because the private operators of buses pulled out of services there. So we need a contingency plan. If First Bus was to say tomorrow to us, sorry, we could use our money elsewhere, invest it in other things, not just in public transport services, and pulled out of buses locally, we would have a massive problem. So we need a contingency plan for public ownership of buses as well. But we know we won't get the money for it unless the government gives us the money, so it would be a limited service. The reality is we're going to have to work with operators like, I know everyone wants to promises public services, public buses. They actually weren't even very good when they were publicly owned, to be honest. What we're going to unfortunately have to do is work with the people who make profit out of buses, because without that, we simply won't have sufficient buses. And let me give you an example. Recently, 57 million was spent on turning buses into electric buses. 7 million of that came from the public purse, I think came through WECA. 50 million of that came from First Bus. And in one sense, thank God First Bus was there to put that investment in. I know the private operators can become unpopular, but they are also limited in what they can do. There are rising costs, but also they have to meet the demands of the traffic commissioner as well. And there's a guy who used to run a service, practically a one-man service, from central Bristol out to Keynsham. It's called a bus. He has to predict the time the bus is going to take from central Bristol to Temple Meads. On a good day, it's 10 minutes. On a bad day, it's 30 minutes. What does he tell the traffic commissioner it's going to be? If he says it's going to be 10 minutes, every time he's late, 30 minutes, he's going to be fined. if he says, right, okay, I'll be safe, I'll say 30 minutes, he gets to Temple Meads in 10 minutes, and all the passengers are saying, why aren't you going off? Because I've told the traffic commissioner it takes 30 minutes to get here, so these issues are not simple to resolve. Thank you.
Yeah, and considering where we are with this Hustings being, environmental and transition, equally the airport was mentioned earlier, and again, I would not support the expansion of Bristol Airport, but the technology is there to reduce the use of aviation fuel by 40%. 40% of the aviation fuel is used and consumed by the planes taxiing around. So it is possible to make a massive impact on the emissions within the region at a stroke if Bristol Airport, which is not in the region but impacts all of us adversely, if we assist the airport in making that transition, and we could be a world leader in that, in terms of having automated vehicles, hydrogen vehicles or electric vehicles taxiing the planes around.
Yeah, I'll just come back in briefly as well. And I agree with Mary on that point about decarbonising air travel. And actually Airbus, within our region are doing a lot of that work already. So I think we can be a real innovator in that space. But I wanted to come back to the point about the mass rapid transit. And I believe it is possible. I know a lot of people say, well, it's too much of an undertaking, it's too much of a big step. But I believe we can unlock that. And as I said before, it's about building out from the existing train lines that we have, looking at where the disused lines are, looking at how we bring in private money as well, alongside public money. And I mean, you've got an investable proposition because there are going to be returns on that line. So it's building the right case, and I think we can get that right over the coming months. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, here's one for you. Mary says, how many of you, will show hands, are in favour of the A4 Keynsham? Bypass bus lane. As if I'd never heard of it. The bypass bus lane. Those of you in favour? Those of you against? Those of you who couldn't give a monkeys? Which seems to be quite a few. Yeah, you've got, so if you get elected, you know exactly where to go, don't you? Again, not trying to blow Transition Bath's trumpet too much, but if you see in that infographic, it says car clubs. Did you know there was a car club in Bath? Yeah? Did you know Transition Bath set the first one up? Yeah, there you are. It's another reason to sign up for our newsletter and join us. Gosh, I don't know, I'm going to stop sooner or later. Okay, speaking of airports, there we go. Bristol Airport is likely to apply for significant increase in capacity in the very near future. It's outside our area, but we have a say in it, and those of you who have been woken up by overnight flights will probably have something to say as well. So
that council's applied to join Peter as well. And
yeah.
In the next couple of years, North Somerset will be a member. They're in the process of
in the process, yeah. So North Somerset may be dragged into our wonderful WECA.
Well, they've applied. They're not coming. They've applied to the Secretary of State.
Okay, I'm told they've applied.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want them. Do we want them? No, nobody cares. Okay, so question 5. Mary, you started on airports. Do you want to go first? And then Ollie, and then Ian.
I feel this is just too late. No, I can't do it, so I'll just stand further back. No, is that, I don't support it. You've heard me say why, but what we do need to do is have an effective strategy of how people get to and from. I accept the fact that, people do need to, or feel they need to fly, and people are entitled to take a holiday. We don't want to be the joy police and stop people from having some, joys in life, but all the time we need to be mindful. It's the harm principle. How much harm are we doing to other people with the actions we're taking? And I think particularly in South Bristol, there is a huge impact of the airport with people having free car parking. They park around near where the Bristol flyer goes out, and they leave their cars in Bedminster because they haven't got a residence parking zone. I don't know if you have a similar area in Bath or towards Keynsham, or that is similarly impacted, but we need to have those better transport systems to and from the airport to ensure that harm is not relocated to you, because actually the airport is not using its full capacity that it has at the moment, which I think is 12 million for its flights. And we also need to get better in terms of, as I say, the technology innovations. And I actually set up a meeting with Electroflight, who were developing electric batteries for planes, and Rolls-Royce. So that is now the project that is going forward, and I took that project to the Minister of Transport at the time as well, and that's the kind of thing that we can do with our great sort of innovation and tech centres like the National Composites Centre and the whole high-value manufacturing catapult. Also the Smart Cities catapult, and all of the money that perhaps working with those systems can bring into the region to have smart tech to improve all of our connectivity on the mass transit side of things.
Yeah, I think on this one, Mary and I are very much on the same page. Clearly, the approach from the airport is premature. I mean, they haven't even reached the 10 million, and they already have an agreement up to 12 million, and they're saying they want to go above that before they've even got there. So it does seem completely premature. I'm proud that Baines Council recently voted to oppose and would publicly oppose any proposal that might come from the airport. Of course, it's not within the Baines area, so Baines can't block it, but it can be one of the statutory consultees that can feed in ideas. But crucially, I agree with the point that North Somerset should be in. Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. It's within the same geographic area. So much of the infrastructure that's connected to Bristol is also across into North Somerset. There's also the connection along the estuary and going down to Weston-super-Mare. There's such a sort of natural geography that makes sense to bring North Somerset in. That would allow for better joined up planning, also in terms of transport, and absolutely even within the existing capacity of the airport, we know that it drives a lot of induced traffic in that direction. So moving towards, again, a potential rapid transit link out to the airport, I think that could be one of the areas where, again, you could get investment for that, because there's a very clear demand, there's a very clear passenger movement there. So that would be a good place to look at mass transit. And then finally, on the decarbonising air travel, again, very much in agreement. There is a huge opportunity for our region to be the innovator in that decarbonisation with Airbus, with Rolls-Royce, with some of those key engineering firms that have some of their biggest operations inside our area, in Filton, in South Gloucestershire. So again, it's working across the whole region. There's also the Bristol and Bath Science Park there. So we have that innovation, and they have supply chains and people that are then supplying them. So there's a knock-on effect in terms of creating new jobs, creating new opportunities for a whole new area around a carbon neutral approach to flying. Thanks. Sorry, Ian.
Thank you. And I did answer this earlier, no to the 15 million, because I think that will incentivise the people who make money out of air passengers to actually go to electric planes. So I think it's clearly a no. But it does allow me to pick up the democracy question. Economically, it's a joke that the Labour government didn't allow North Somerset to be part of this election. Cynically, I think what they'll do, they'll let them in, but it means North Somerset people haven't had a chance to vote. It's also wrong, and we all know it, you can't give mayors too much power. Look what happens in the state when you give Trump too much power. We don't want that sort of democracy. Fortunately, mayors can't make decisions on their own. They can only make decisions if they have the support of not North Somerset, because they've been banned, but Bristol, South Gloucestershire and Bath in North East Somerset. So there at least is some control over the mayor. We know what happened in Wiltshire. They got rid of the local borough councils and set out one super Wiltshire council. We already had that years ago. Up till 1996, from 1974, we had Avon. That was a much more democratic system, in truth. I know no one likes to admit it, but it was a more democratic system than we got now. We need North Somerset in. The sooner they're in the better. They also don't want the airport expansion. Ironically, it's not owned by North Somerset. Bristol Council do have shares in that airport. But even in terms of the dock area, they've got the Royal Portbury Dock in North Somerset as well. That is a major economic contributor to not just this region, to the British economy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Transition Bath has never built an airport. Okay, so I must admit that this last question I had a hand in. So Philip, if we could have the last question. So what we've heard is a lot of talk about how they would improve, but I'm particularly interested, and bearing in mind what Bryn said, that democracy should be at the local level, and I'm quite interested to hear how the candidates would juggle those two things. A mayor, a Trump-like mayor, or just people like you and me on the council. Give it your best shot. Do you want to start, Mary? Then Ian and then Ollie.
In a somewhat sort of ironic stance, my new Blue Sky account is called Mayor Slayer, because I'm the person who ran and led the Scrap the Mayor campaign in Bristol, because I believed that the Mayor of Bristol was a blocker to things getting done within the region, and that role was very dictatorial. It was completely unaccountable. The only way that you could counter what that mayor was doing was by voting them out of office once every 4 years. That's not the kind of democracy that serves any of us. I believe that democracy is not something that's done to us and that we participate in for one day every 4 years. This is something that is a journey that we need to sit at the table together for. And that's what I'm all about. I couldn't have run that campaign by myself. I did it as an independent. I've only been in the Green Party 18 months. Prior to that, I was in the Lib Dems for 15 years. And I didn't fall out of I just ceased to serve the needs of where I wanted to go in terms of the climate and the environment. It's why I've joined the Green Party. It's a real positive push. But working together cross-party with the Green Party, with Lib Dems in Bristol and the Conservatives, as well as a significant chunk of Labour councillors, Labour activists who didn't agree with the Labour policy to keep that Mayor of Bristol, we succeeded in removing that role of mayor. Why I'm running for this one is because it's the complete antithesis of that. This is a role that requires working together, working collaboratively. We've got Green Party leaders of Bristol Council, we've got Labour and Lib Dem leaders of South Gloss, both of whom the current leaders I actually used to work with, because I worked on South Gloss Council for 5.5 years. So I know them both personally. I don't know Councillor Kevin Guy, leader here in Bristol, in Bath. But I want to. And, I'll accept any invitation. I've already had a meeting with South Gloucestershire councillors, the leaders and the chief exec. I've had a meeting with North Somerset councillors, because I'm very pro bringing North Somerset in, and actually my assistant today is the councillor for Rington, whose ward the airport is in. And so we have to have that joined up thinking. Otherwise, you miss out on the talent. I'm not arrogant enough to think that the Green Party has got all of the answers. We haven't necessarily got all of the policies perfect. We have a really great basis, and I am loving learning about it, and I want to espouse those virtues and tell people about all of that possibility for a just transition, because that's what the Green Party is all about. It is about social justice in order to achieve climate justice.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I first became a councillor in 1991. I was only 28 at the time, and that was at Filton Town Council. I grew up in Bristol. They didn't have town councils, and when I got elected as a Labour councillor at Filton Town Council. And I've been a Labour member for 40 years. And I kept going for the Metro Mayor position, and Labour kept blocking me. Not by members, a member's vote, they blocked me by having small panels deciding you weren't fit enough to go for it. And I thought, well, I've been a councillor 25 years, I've got more experience than any of your other candidates. So this time, I'm now 62, I used my post office pension to put up the 5,000 deposit myself, and I thought, I can't guarantee tomorrow, as none of us can. I might not be here in 4 times, I'm going for it now. Now, the advantage of being a councillor in South Gloucestershire is we did have town councils, we could make local decisions. Filton Town Council is one of the few areas that runs its own swimming pool. All the other swimming pools are normally run by South Gloucestershire Council. But even when I got elected as the South Gloucestershire councillor, we had area forums where we could make local decisions. We can make local decisions over local traffic management schemes, whether we were going to be putting in pedestrian crossings, and we also had local money for local grants. Unfortunately, I lost my seat by 1 vote in 2019, and in the 4 years I was away, they took that away, but they're going to reintroduce it. I've been in coalition with the Lib Dems on South Gloucestershire Council, right up until the point I said to Labour I was standing as an independent, and then my 40 years as a Labour Party member was swiftly ended by the Labour Party. So that explains why I've got so much experience as a councillor. I was a Labour councillor, but now I'm an independent. So local democracy is possible. We have it in South Gloucestershire, but they don't have local town councils in Bristol. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I mean, I started this conversation saying how my whole background is around connecting and working together with community organisations. I believe we have been let down by the outgoing mayor, and we need someone who can bring people together, genuinely bring people together and listen and work together with all the different parts of the West of England Combined Authority area. And crucially, that starts with the 3 different councils. And I would say that the Lib Dems are uniquely placed at the moment because we are leading here in Bath and North East Somerset, championing many of these ideas that we've talked about tonight around climate and sustainability. We're also jointly leading in South Gloucestershire with the Labour Party. We collaborate closely, and we have some key committee positions in Bristol now under the new committee approach. So we are the only party that actually has leading roles across all 3 authority areas. We can bring people together. I have trusted relationships already with those key leaders in each of those 3 local areas. So that is a crucial part of how the West of England should work. And unfortunately, under the mayor, the 2 mayors as they had in Bristol previously, they were both in the same party and actually couldn't work together. We already work together. We are a party of collaborators, and that is essential to, I think, the way that this should work going forward. But it doesn't stop at the local authorities. It's also about how we then work with stakeholders, such as organisations like yours. Regular meetings, having community meetings like this is something that I'm very committed to. I'd want to have many more community meetings like this across the whole region. And I think crucially also bringing in direct voices from residents. So how can we improve consultations? How can we have much more co-design in our services so that people do feel heard? Because I know that there are people out there who feel their voices are not being fully heard. We have an opportunity to build something that is genuinely a much more open and a much more transparent approach going forward. And this is a key election. So I really hope that you can see that opportunity and get behind what we can do together. Thanks.
Right, so thank you. I could vote for any of them, actually. I've got to put I've got to put a cross somewhere. I don't know. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I have Lynn there, who's got, in theory, a mic. I'm going to get some questions from the audience, and not from people who usually ask questions, because I know what they're going to ask. So the people in the front row can just stop, and there's a lady there who I've never seen before who's going to ask a question. I don't want to hear the questions we hear all the time, and I don't want to hear personal beefs. What I want to hear is a genuine question to these people. So.
You've all talked about transport links within the WECA area. I would like to ask you how you will turn things around from looking internally to actually facing outwardly, and the transport links that will go out, not just within our area, but linking up with other areas. Just to give you an example, the completely forgotten, abandoned east of Bath, which never gets anything in terms of transport links. So how will we change things? How would you change things to look outwardly rather than just inwardly in terms of our transport planning?
Perfect question.
Who'd like to start? Go on then, Mary. Oh, they're fighting about it.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the key points. Earlier on I mentioned the importance of an integrated approach, and that means, exactly as you say, not just serving the communities that are already well served, but making sure that no community is being cut off or left behind. Yesterday I went out to Tunley and Camerton, just out towards Timsbury, and their bus service has been cut there. They're completely isolated now. Very difficult to actually get into Bath or into Bristol. It means that people are now relying on this so-called on-demand service for Westlink, which, hearing from the residents there, isn't working. People are not able to rely on that supposedly on-demand service. So absolutely, I think we need to look at the whole network. And we also need to look at where, again, coming back to that point about light rail, there are disused railway lines even going out to Midsummer Norton, for example. Why are we not looking ambitiously at how we reconnect? I mean, they had railways up until the 60s. Why are we not reconnecting those communities better through light rail? And that, one of the things that I'd really like to explore is a kind of a loop around the outside of Bristol, and then connecting to the airport, connecting down to the Summer Valley, connecting round to Bath. So you would actually create a loop that then allows people to move around much more easily. Mary?
Yes, I've also been out to that area, sort of around Farnborough and Timsbury, and and experienced the 522 bus, which is supported service from the west of England, but also understanding that Bath, this side of the west of England region, you probably feel closer to places that are to the east of you, and so it's absolutely natural to want to get in and out of the region. There isn't some sort of wall around it. We're not going to build a wall and ask Wiltshire to pay for it, are we? We need to have permeable boundaries. And the one absolutely wonderful thing, one of the first communications I had from anybody was a handwritten letter from Alan in Wickwar, who said, I have lost my 84 and 85 buses that went around the 11 villages, and the reason we were given is because it goes over the boundary into Wootton-under-Edge. Well, that's just ridiculous. If that is the nearest destination for your shopping, for your social life, for your community, we shouldn't be saying, well, you can't travel there because we won't fund it because you're daring to go that bit outside of the region. We have to look to fund that, and I'm absolutely with you in saying let's look at innovative ways of working with the authorities. And I talked about the devolution bill. Potentially, the west of England could get larger. There is a potential for Wiltshire to be coming in, and then actually that would create a really viable offer for everybody here in Bath to go in and out sort of that direction. But then there are other suggestions where if we got the policing powers within the west of England, then maybe Somerset would be the logical inclusion, because you'd probably want a coterminous boundary with the Avon and Somerset Police and Crime Commissioner. And where that's happened elsewhere, what they've done is they deleted one of those posts so you don't have these multiple layers. And that was another reason for getting rid of the Bristol mayor, because in Bristol they had the Lord Mayor, they had 70 councillors, they had the Bristol Mayor, they had the West of England Mayor, and then they had the Police and Crime Commissioner. And just most people say, what? And I've tried to explain to my partner's parents who live out in Hutton in Western-super-Mare, on numerous occasions how these levels of democracy work with each other. And it's just baffling for the majority of ordinary people. Who do you go to? How do I go? How do I decide? You started off with that at the beginning. How do I decide whether I want to get my pothole fixed or my bus back or who am I going to? And there should be this one point of contact. When my father died 2 years ago, there was a one-stop shop for telling all of the services that my father had died and how I could, deal with all of those government services. We should have a much easier system within the West of England, working with the parish councils, the town councils, and the 3 local authorities to be able, so you can just go to one point of contact and say, this is the thing I really want to get done. It shouldn't be beholden on you to know who has got the budget and how to get that done. And if it's fixing the buses, let's get everybody working together, all the other modes of transport with rail, which we vitally need the new stations in Tarfield, Filton North, Henbury and Brentry, St Anne's potentially, Salford potentially. Let's look at the places where we can get those expensive but easier wins so that people can get around to just get on with their lives and enjoy their lives and get to work or enjoy their leisure, because life isn't just all about work either. So we want people to be able to transport themselves around, see friends, see family, and have a healthy and happy life.
Thank you. We all know you're paying more council tax now than ever and you're getting less services. There's a reason for that. Government grants to local authorities have been cut by 90% over the last 15 years, okay? So that is basic. But let's give some credit. Imagine what the uproar was when they stopped HS2 going to the north and they said, we're going to stop it at Birmingham. How good is our railway lines from Bristol, Bath to London? They are fantastic services compared to what the north. Even if you wanted to go from Manchester to Leeds, we've got much better train services. If you want to go from, close to Filton Abbey Wood. If I want to go Filton Abbey Wood to Salisbury, I could get a train there probably as quick as I can to drive there. If I want to go to Bath tonight, I've caught that train tonight, it was only 20 minutes. So let's start from a positive. There are good transport, they've got to be better. Hopefully I'm going to be on ITV News tomorrow night talking about Filton North. That used to be there for Rolls-Royce workers years ago. As soon as they said the airfield was closing at Filton, all the local residents said we need a train station. That was in the master plan in 2016. I don't like to say St Anne's, I like to call it St Anne's Park train station. We need that restored. It was there when I was a little boy up until I think about 68. Yeah, up to about 68. We do need, so we can improve local train stations as well. But the reality is we're going to have so limited funding. The irony is we're going to actually be spending that money on subsidised bus service. We had a complaint last night from someone who lived at Muller Road in Bristol. That's quite central. Now, for you, those of you who don't know Muller Road in Bristol, it's where the IKEA is, and it used to be the home of Bristol Rovers before they moved to Twerton, and then they obviously moved back to Bristol Rugby Football Club. So, I said, you do have problems, their buses weren't turning up, but it's nothing compared to rural South Gloucestershire, rural Bath and North East Somerset. The truth of the matter is, Bristol services, internal Bath services are profitable. And obviously some of that money gets creamed off to go into profits. We can't cross over. The ironically is the money we get is the WECA Mayor. We will be using that money for subsidised bus services, including working with other local authorities. I know Dave Ridgewell has been a big campaigner on this for many years. He doesn't just look at what goes on in the west of England. He looks at the bus services connecting the west of England to Wiltshire, to Gloucestershire and to Somerset. And we will still have to continue that. My fear is that's all we'll be spending our bus money on, and we won't have a proper transit system. But unless the government gives us that money, that's where we'll be. Thank you.
Can I ask the woman who asked that question, have they answered it?
There was quite a lot about internal services, and yeah, there was a little bit about connections with Wiltshire and with the external councils, but I would have liked to have heard a bit more on how we can improve access from those areas outside our.
I suggest you get hold of them later on and verbally beat them.
What a fantastic service provided by community transports in local authorities as well.
Chair, there is one thing though.
You have a Western Gateway Transport Board. Whether looks after that consists of Wiltshire, Gloucestershire, Dorset, and that sits in WECA's office, where it has a kind of noting on it. We deal with Wiltshire. And the chair now is Mandarin, if anybody doesn't know who she is. She's a baby.
Right, next, who have we got next? Someone who's never, that gentleman.
Hold the mic sort of there rather than...
Okay, thanks very much. So I've had some marvellous ideas from all the panellists tonight, or the contestants, shall we say, about mass transits and new trains, new stations, and new buses, and subsidised bus services. I've heard lots of talk about we want our money back, we want more grants, and we want more subsidies. My thought on that, before my question, is that the people who pay for that are primarily businesses, because they employ people that pay taxes, and the businesses pay taxes. And if we don't encourage business to continue working properly, whether it's in the west of England or the whole of the UK, then there are difficulties in that. So discouraging transport in terms of the trains, or in terms even of the airport, when there's electric
And your question is?
My question is, how are you going to encourage business to come in and improve their tax input into the West of England area, together with when you have discouraging policies like low traffic neighbourhoods, which are not doing very well in Bristol and Bath? Can I ask a question of the panelists? Would you, because you do have the funding for LTNs, would you give that funding out if there were a majority against it in any particular
Okay, there's two questions here.
Thanks very much.
One is about LTNs, which is a very interesting one, but the main question was, what would you do to bring business into the area and keep it there so that the tax take goes to the... I can't remember who goes first now. I've completely lost the plot here. Is it? No, it's Ian. Off you go. He was daydreaming.
Thank you very much. And this is one of my few criticisms of the Green Party, because I've met the Barton Hill residents. I grew up by Barton Hill. St. Park's just across the river from it. I went to St. George School, which is on the edge of Barton Hill. When I first got married, I lived in Redfield. Redfield's affected, St. George affected, and Barton Hill's affected. It's gone too far. And the reason I say that, there have been 6,000 objectors to the Barton Hill scheme. That is too many. If you've got that many objectors, there's something wrong with your local consultation. One of their criticisms is that there are too many from Sustrans working at WECA. Now, I don't know how truthful that is, but there needs to be a more balanced road. Because their argument is it actually doesn't reduce pollution. It's causing more pollution as cars are driving around. Can I say, I don't know Bath well, but in terms of Bristol, one of the reasons we've always avoided recessions like the North have faced is because we've always had a multitude of different industries. We had the aerospace industry in the north. In the 70s, we had insurance companies moving out of London, coming to central Bristol, and for years, people could rely on a job at Will's tobacco factory. Now, thankfully, we all know for our health that is no longer the case. But Bristol has always done well. It's always been a port for hundreds of years as well, bringing business in. You're right, we have to protect this. So, in principle, I agree with parking levies in workplaces, but you can't introduce parking levies when you have an economy like we've got at the moment, because those businesses won't be able to survive. We have to, but let's not forget, those businesses are paying that money now. It's going to central government. It's just that we're in that contract, and unfortunately I am repeating this, but it deserves repeating. Those businesses are making net contributions to the British economy, and we're not getting the money back. So that is a fundamental issue. We need to get the money back. Because I have to say, in Filton, we have more jobs than people, to be honest. Luckily, my understanding is when I was on the council when MOD came to Filton Abbey Wood, my understanding is they wanted to go to the chocolate factory at Kincham and they got rejected locally. And so that's how they ended up at Filton Abbey Wood. So we've got thousands of jobs at Filton Abbey Wood and potential for even more. We've got the main Royal Mail site has moved to Filton as well. And we still got Airbus, Rolls-Royce, GKM. So we are a major hub of employment for the west of England. Thank you.
I'm sure this is sinking. I've explained how, my background's in business development with some of the major multinationals and, some of the smaller companies as well, and also had a very good relationship with Dimag out at Chippenham as well. And, all of those companies and businesses are helped by that government model, because the whole point of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult and the NCC is that, there are companies out there that are producing things. If you talk about technology readiness level and it applies across all businesses, there are businesses that are doing well, doing the thing well, but they rarely have time to innovate because they can't stop what they're doing. They need an 85% productivity rate in order to be able to make enough profit to survive. And then you've got those nascent sort of entrepreneurs in the very sort of early stages who, we have our wonderful universities who are having sort of small startups, but where businesses are particularly failed is with scale up. And so I think there is funding within the west of England in order to help support businesses to do that. And I've got some quite sort of innovative ideas about how we can support businesses with de-risking taking on employees from different backgrounds or supporting with apprenticeships. Because if we have a central service whereby we can take on the HR function, for example, but that enables a small business to take on an extra employee, but without having to do all that additional paperwork, then there's some really practical small things that we can do that could make a big difference. And then in terms of sort of the other ways to support and enhance business, it is ensuring that their employees can get to work, because otherwise, if you haven't got happy employees because they've taken 2 hours to get to work, then we need, comes back to this not solving the transport problem. Transport per head in this region is only just over £400. In London, it is £1,300. Ian's right, we've been getting a bum deal from national government in this area. They've been funding all of the areas that are not performing well, and we're getting penalised despite having this positive contribution to the National Treasury. And we have to get stronger and louder with government. And that's another reason for the region getting bigger. At the moment, we've got 10 and a bit MPs within the region. That's not painful enough for government. And it's, and if we elect a Labour mayor, then that's not painful enough for government either. But if you elect one of the three of us, then you are sending a message directly to government. Do that. And on at.Ends, might I have 20 seconds more? at.Ends, I'm really pleased that the chair of the Transport Committee gave an apology to the people in Barton Hill about going in with the police, because that is not something that I think anybody should go into politics and wish to happen. It is not an acceptable way to enforce something on a community. I'm yet to go over and meet people over there, although I have met lots of people, but I also know that you've had issues here in Bath, and I think it's no good going around doing stuff to communities just because of a political philosophy. You have to work to understand what are the barriers to people being able to go along with that, and how can we support people to make changes in a gradual or a modular way in order that it doesn't cut them off from friends, family, social life, or anything else.
Yeah, I mean, again, building on, I think, some of the points that Ian made, it's about building the jobs of the future. I don't see a contradiction between what we've been talking about tonight and providing new growth opportunities. In fact, these are the growth industries. The industries of the future are, you know, low carbon flight that we've talked about, engineering, some of the tech sector that we see also in our region, creative industries. We have such a huge presence of creative industries in our region as well. I would work very closely with all of those different employers, identifying what their needs are, identifying how the authority can actually support them to bring, you know, those people that work in those organisations closer to them. And that's where the transport comes in. They're asking for that transport. They're not saying we don't want transport. They're saying we need people to be able to get to our offices. You know, so actually the transport is precisely to enable people to be able to get to their place of work, to be able to get to their place of study. And that's why it's so essential that we do get that right. And you know, I'm glad that Ian highlighted that this is a net contributor, our region, to the national budget. So we're not asking for a favour. We're actually saying there is a share of that national budget that is being taken in by the Treasury. We're saying that some of that should be reinvested in the region. And as I pointed out earlier, I think if we can get it right, we can create a regional infrastructure development fund. And you look at other countries around the world, they're much more ambitious about that. You think about even in France, certainly in the Middle East, in Qatar or in China, you can draw in private money alongside public money to build that infrastructure once you have a clear vision. And that's why it's so important we have that shared vision and we bring businesses alongside with us. And I think they want to see that vision too. That's what the people at Airbus told me. They want that vision. They haven't had it from the current mayor. So there's a real opportunity here. And on the at.Ends, there is always a very, very careful balance to be struck. And I think I have personal experience in the Walcott ward where there was a proposal for livable neighbourhood. I personally hosted 4 major public meetings with 100 people at each of those, listened to the residents. There were a number of very, very clear and very specific objections to that particular design. We actually tried, as ward councillors, myself and John Leach, to go back to the team and say, could we redesign this? Unfortunately, the time pressure from the national government funding meant that there was no time to redesign. So that particular scheme actually was dropped, as you know. And I feel that was the right decision because it would have actually created more complications for residents in that area. So I think we need to be grown up, and you know, if there are challenges with particular schemes, we should be willing to say we can't make this one work. Let's go back to the drawing board. And I think that actually that's one of the things that the West of England has not done very well is the consultation and actually listening to residents, genuinely listening and building a shared approach that works for everyone.
Right. We've run out of time, and I'm sorry for those. Yes, because I haven't said what I want to say yet, and I've got a microphone. No, I want to thank the 3 candidates who turned up. I don't particularly want to thank the 3 who didn't, but you can find their stuff online. How many people, just a quick question before you all go, how many people have changed their mind today after listening to these very eloquent speakers? There you are. So it was worthwhile, wasn't it? If you can't change your mind, you're in trouble. Okay, so thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank these guys so much. I'd vote for any of them. And don't forget Transition Bath. We'd love a donation on the way out. We'd love to see you on our newsletter. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe journey home. Should you be able to catch a bus?
The church.
And the church. And whatever else. Thank you.